Good afternoon. I am Robert Green with the National Association of Investment Companies, and this is the next installment of NAIC's Insights series. I'm pleased to be joined today by my friend and colleague, Mr. Hank Kim, Esquire, of the National Conference on Public Employee Retirement System. Welcome, Hank.
Hello, Bob. Thanks for having me.
Oh, thank you for joining me in the studio today. At least it looks like we're in a studio with our matching backgrounds. Thank you for being a good sport on that.
Absolutely.
Hank, tell us a little bit about NCPERS before we get started.
Yeah, so first, Bob, let me thank you for, again, having me and hosting this program, and to your members who may not be familiar with the National Conference on Public Employee Retirement Systems. Obviously a long name, so like many organizations that's based in Washington, D.C., we go by our acronym NCPERS. And we are the largest trade association for state and local public sector pension plans. We were established in 1941, and currently we have over 500 plans and stakeholders that are members in all 50 states and all the territories, as well as a couple of, a few members up in Canada and 2 members in Australia. Obviously very US-centric though, and we represent the plans that ensure the retirement security of our state and local employees. So your teachers, your, pretty relevant now are frontline healthcare workers if they work for a county or for a city, police officers, firefighters, and other state and local employees who make up about 20 million working Americans, which represents about 14% of the U.S. workforce.
Wow, that's outstanding. Hank, it's obvious why NAIC and its members would be interested in talking with NCPERS and getting to know NCPERS better. But tell us a little bit about you first. I've come to know you. We've known each other for a number of years now. I see you all over town doing many of the things that I find myself doing running NAIC, but we don't often get to figure out who the person is. Tell us a little bit about you, where you're from, your family, a little bit on your background.
Great. Yeah, thank you, Bob. So I currently reside in Northern Virginia with my wife and 2 kids. Our offices are based in Washington, D.C., which is a short drive over the river, the Potomac River, from where I live. I grew up in New Jersey, had a pretty, standard middle class, lifestyle growing up. Went to school in the Midwest, went to Wisconsin undergrad, and then went to Indiana University in Bloomington for my law school. And then right after I graduated, I ended up working for Senator Bill Bradley out of New Jersey for about a year just before he retired. That's where I got to cut my teeth, as it were, on tax issues, healthcare issues, and pension issues. And then once he retired from the Senate, I went to work for a small a hospital association, and then from there to a public sector union, where I got to really get my hands dirty with pension issues. And then from there, came over to NCPERS in 2003 as the Director of Government Relations and Counsel. And then 6 years later, in June of 2006, became the Executive Director and Counsel of NCPERS. So it's been a long journey. I can't believe I'm saying that. I do remember the times when I used to be the youngest person in the room, and now I think I am pretty much not the youngest person in the room.
Well, it happens to the best of us, Hank, if we're lucky.
Yes.
I've got quite a bit more gray hair in this goatee and on the sides of my head than I did when I first started as well. But we refer to that as wisdom, Hank. So we're wise. Right. And I had a millennial introduce me on a panel 2 weeks ago and call me seasoned. So I'm not quite sure what we're seasoned with, Hank, but we'll take it. We'll take
the good stuff, all the good stuff.
Absolutely. So I guess big top of mind question. how are things at NCPERS with the pandemic going on? What changes have you guys had to make, and how's everybody doing?
Yeah, so we in the DC area shut down in mid May. So I'm sorry, mid March, excuse me. So I can't believe it's only been 5 months. It feels like 5 years. And it's interesting. During that 5 month stretch, a lot has happened, right? So certainly we've had the COVID, experience and all the things that have followed, and I'm sure we're going to be talking a lot about that. Then we had the economic recession due to COVID, and then we can't forget about the murder hornets that's invading us on the West Coast. And then just last night we had a hurricane on the East Coast. So I'm not sure if I can take more of this, but in terms of how we are doing, I think overall, I certainly count myself very fortunate. From my family standpoint, my wife and I are both largely able to work from home. We both are, still drawing two incomes for the family. Our kids are adjusting well, and most importantly, all of us are healthy, including our extended family. So, from that standpoint, again, I can't stress enough how fortunate we feel. In terms of the organization, again, fortunately, our staff, we are able to, again, shelter in place, work remotely, still provide the services to our members that rely upon our services. And to a large degree, I don't think we've really missed a beat, from shutting down in mid-March to where we are now. I think a lot of that is, and as I'm sure it is with NAIC, as a small organization, you have to be very nimble. And again, in another area where we're very similar, we put on conferences for a large number of folks, which means we're constantly out of the office for days, if not weeks at a time. So shifting from being out of the office for a couple of weeks to shifting to being out of the office for 5 months, maybe a year, is not that big of order of magnitude change. Fortunately, again, we have the platforms readily available so that we can do the work that our members need from us. So organizationally, I think we are doing pretty well. I think we've been very nimble. We've been able to adapt and really provide value to our members.
That's outstanding. So, Hank, you've got over 500 members. Sounds like you're in at least 3 countries. Lots of events. I think you guys, matter of fact, I know that you have even more events and activities and initiatives going on than we do. Tell me a little bit about what's an average week like, pre-COVID? What's an average week like at NCPERS? What are the things that you and your members are focused on, and how do you divide your task up amongst you and your staff?
Yeah, so, we go by our 3 core missions, which are advocacy, research, and education. And it nicely falls into sort of one of our sort of slogans, which is it's who we are, ARE. And in terms of, what our normal work would have been, so based here in Washington, D.C., advocacy is certainly a big aspect of what our members find of value relative to the services that we provide. So, advocating on behalf of our members here in Washington, D.C., as well as going out to the states and even the sub-political divisions of counties and cities. We've done that. We are able to provide testimony. We are able to provide expert witnesses, both at the federal and at the state level. And then in terms of research, it's a big aspect of what we've done, particularly since the mid-2010s. And we've been producing at least one major original research paper per year, as well as ongoing surveys of our membership, as well as smaller research series throughout the year. And then finally, something that you alluded to, probably our biggest forward-facing aspect is our educational programs. Specifically, we do have at least 10 unique and separate programs that we produce throughout the year. And so that certainly keeps us on our toes, throughout the calendar year. So, as executive director, I think, a large part of what I do is to delegate and administer. And again, fortunately, we at NCPERS are really blessed with really talented and dedicated individuals. And so we have our senior director of operations, who largely is responsible for the operational aspect of the programs and coordinating the educational content. We have our manager of social media and communications, who helps us with our internal as well as external communication. And then our membership and conference manager, who makes sure our members' needs are taken care of. That most importantly, from an operational and a small business perspective, that our dues and from our members are paid, that conference registrations are sent and collected, and just overall making sure that the office runs smoothly. So that's, and then we have our research director, who obviously is in charge of our research.
Very good. Don't want to leave out the research director. That
No. Yeah, we're gonna have to edit this and make sure I give him a long, sounding introduction.
Fair enough. I'll make sure that we do that. So Hank, with that many members and a good sized staff, but still a small staff, what are some of the issues that you're hearing that are top of mind for your members? What are they thinking about? What are they struggling with? What are they excited about? What does their world look like as they share it with you?
So I would say, and I'll divide that answer into pre-COVID and post-COVID, right?
Fair enough.
So pre-COVID, I think it was largely sort of the mundane operations of a pension plan. But really, where we added our value was in providing, again, it's really the ARE, giving them, sort of the political advocacy and the media cover when there are unfair media coverage, providing them research so that when they do talk to their constituencies, whether it be the plan sponsor or the members of the public in their state or jurisdiction, that they have fact-based research, qualitative and quantitative data set that they can rely on. And then lastly, giving them a forum for the interaction, whether it be one-on-one in group settings or through formal learning from a subject matter expert who is presenting. And obviously, all of those have been impacted post-COVID. And so what I can say now is the things that they're most concerned about. I think in March, April, May, they were very concerned about where the markets were and what the overall economy was going to do. They were also very concerned about operations, of their pension plans, how to conduct business as near normal as possible when everybody is working remotely and all the logistical and operational challenges that come with all that. And we need to remember, even the smallest of public sector pension plans, in the grand scheme of things, when they're managing $2 billion, $3 billion, upwards of $400 billion, these are not just small organizations. They're incredibly sophisticated, incredibly complex, and to try to manage that. And for our largest member, for instance, CalPERS, with like 3,000 employees, that's a lot of logistical issues that they needed to work through in a short period of time. So right now, I think at this point in early August, a lot of those administrative issues have been largely worked out. I think, fortunately, the markets have rebounded, at least at this point. But it's always a concern what the markets are going to do going forward for the balance of the summer and going into the fall and winter.
So Hank, I know that your pension plans focus a lot on investments and hitting their actuarial rate of returns. I want to put that to the side for a second, because when we start talking about that's probably all that we'll get time for. Talk to us a little bit about the things that pension plans deal with that are separate and apart from hiring managers, particularly around insurance, around healthcare, around prescription drugs, around other activities, things that you're involved in advocating for around Washington, and things that are heavily on the minds of your fellow CEOs at your membership.
Yeah, so most U.S. State and local pension plans do not really involve themselves with what's known in the industry as other post-employment benefits, or OPEB. But there are obviously very significant number of high-profile plans that are involved in retiree healthcare. So CalPERS, for instance. So obviously that was a major concern for them, again, heading into COVID. But for the vast majority of plans, it was really making sure that the staff were able to work remotely, that they had the platform and the hardware and software to be able to work from home. And many of the plans even talked about do the staff have sort of the physical space to be able to work from home, and if they don't, how can plans help them with either equipment or furniture to be able to do that. What plans have learned, actually, though, is that very similar to NCPERS, again, very according to human nature, we adapt, and people and staff at public pension plans are no different, and they've, I think, to a very large degree, state and local pension plans have adapted, and they're doing all the things that they need to do for their participants and their beneficiaries. And in fact, some of the preliminary data that's coming out is that in terms of productivity, because people are able to work from home, the productivity is increasing, particularly in areas where initially executives thought that they couldn't do remotely. So for instance, call centers at public plans, there was a high degree of concern and uncertainty as plans shut down in March and April, whether their participants would get the same level of service. And fortunately, and a little surprisingly, they are. And their participants are giving the plan high marks for timeliness and thoroughness of connectivity with the help desk. And the folks who are manning the call centers are reporting to their supervisors a high degree of satisfaction in being able to work from home. So that's one area where plans are really starting to think about, well, when this is over, what would be the new normal? Maybe it's a combination of having people come in for a call center, even call centers, but providing the opportunity and the flexibility to have call centers at home as well.
Hank, I would bet you a lot of managers don't think about the pension plan that they're trying to get an allocation from being one of the largest call center employers in the particular city or state that they're in. But in fact, in most every pension plan, if it's not outsourced, somewhere in that building is a large call center with all the attendant metrics and monitoring and all the other scripts and other activities that go on with pension plans. It's fascinating to think about that, because too often as managers, we only think about the investment activities.
That's right. That's right. And that the operation aspect is something, as I said at the beginning, that a lot of executives were very concerned about. The executives, the CEOs and executive directors, they were very concerned about the administration of the plan. Certainly the chief investment officers were focused laser-like on the returns, but for the executive directors, the EDs and the CEOs, they needed to really focus in on how to deliver the services to their hundreds, if not thousands or tens of thousands, or even millions of participants in their pension plan.
Yeah. No, that's very helpful. So let's shift a little bit, Hank, to the investment side of the house. And I want to start with a debate that I would say was a raging debate 10 years ago, 15 years ago, but it seems like a lot of plans have addressed it. And that's the defined benefit versus defined contribution debate, and in some cases transition. Can you talk a little bit about what that is, break down the acronyms for folks, but let them know why that was such a challenge within your industry?
Yeah, and Bob, I love the way you phrase it, that maybe it seems more in the past than present, but we are still constantly fighting that battle, unfortunately. But just to give sort of table leveling background. So state and local pension plan, for the vast majority of our members, they are defined benefit pension plans, meaning that employees who work for a state, county, or city, after they've worked for a certain period of time, usually somewhere between 20, 25, 30 years, when they separate from service, when they retire, they are essentially given a retirement benefit that is equal to some percentage of their salary that they had when they were during their working years. And it's based on a formula, usually something along the lines of some calculation of final pay, whether it's an average of 5 years or 3 years or the highest 3 years, times, say, typically 2 times the number of years that they worked. So just for simple math purposes, let's say the average high 5 years is around 50,000, and the individual worked for 25 years, and the multiplier is 2. So it's 50,000 times 25 years times 2, which ends up being 50, and then you move the decimal point over 2 spots to make it 50%. And for this individual, their pension benefit when they retire after 25 years of service is 50% of their earning, which is $25,000. So that is what a state and local pension benefit provides. It's a defined benefit plan. The other side is a defined contribution, and I think many folks are maybe more familiar with the defined contribution. For instance, a 401k plan is a version of a defined contribution. And what is known in the defined contribution program is the amount of contribution that goes in, but the benefit that you derive is not fixed, like in a defined benefit or a pension plan. So there has been some debate about what is more appropriate, what is more cost effective.
Hey, Hank, on that point, let me interrupt you. Start with, where does the liability lie in the two plans?
Yeah.
Sorry about
that. No. I'm glad you raised it because I may have always glossed over it. So obviously in a defined benefit plan where the benefit is fixed, the risk of investment and meeting the investment target rests on the plan and on the plan sponsor. The investment risk for defined contribution rests solely on the individual. So the employer, they are only responsible for making a certain percentage of contribution, and then after that, the employee is responsible for the performance of the investment. So the risk is borne exclusively by employees for defined contribution plans, and for defined benefit, the risk is investment risk is largely borne by the employers. I say largely for defined benefit plans in the public sector and the state and local sector, because for state and local plans, it in fact is a little bit, well, it's more than, it is a hybrid plan in that unlike pension plans in the private sector, employees in the public sector, state and local plans, they make contributions to their own retirement. So sort of like in 401ks, where employers and ideally employees make contributions into a 401k, in the state and local governmental plans, employers and employees make contributions. And so there is skin in the game for participants in the state and local pension plan. And beyond sort of that risk, if a plan does go, into insolvency, the participants, while they may have, protection, particularly state constitution or contract protection, there is still risk that the constitutional provisions could be overruled because of some declaration of emergency. So, yeah, go ahead, Bob.
Yeah, I was going to say, so in thinking about a pension plan, there are really three sources of income for that pension plan, correct? Can you talk a little bit about the three levers that a municipality or a state has to pull to ensure the solvency of their plan, and what the relationship is between those revenue streams?
That's right. So thank you. So the income coming into a pension plan include contributions by employers, contributions by employees, but the biggest driver of pension plans is the investment returns. So Bob referenced it a number of times about our assumed rate of return. That's very important because investment returns account for somewhere around 65 to 70% of every dollar that goes out in a pension benefit. So 65 to 70 cents of every dollar that goes out is derived from investment returns, and the remaining 30 cents is from employer contributions or employee contributions.
So Hank, I'm glad you said that 65 to 70% of every dollar is derived from investment returns, because that does two things. One, it demonstrates that the amount of time and energy spent on talking about investments is actually worth the return, right? The return on the investment of talking about it and evaluating it. But it's also important for managers to know that they're not the only thing that pension plans do. They're not the only thing that they're focused on, and there should be no entitlement by any group my own or any others, to those dollars. The only entitlement to those dollars are the beneficiaries. Talk about how what I just said makes you feel and what comes to mind.
Yeah, no, and I can speak on this topic from sort of two perspectives. Obviously, as executive director of NCPERS, but also I sit on a pension plan myself. So I sit on one of the three plans of Fairfax County, Virginia's retirement systems, and I can talk about this in sort of a 10,000-foot abstract level, as well as sort of the nitty-gritty where the rubber meets the road. And you're absolutely right. A large percentage of the time of trustees and staff is devoted to the performance of the investment, because really that's the main function of a pension plan. It's to take the contributions from employers and employees and try to grow that over the next 30 years so that the participants have the promise that they were that were made to them about a fixed stream of income when they retire. So I would say obviously the investment staff is almost exclusively focused on investments. I think the administrative and benefit staff certainly pay attention to it and are cognizant of what's going on with investments. And from a trustee standpoint, as the overseeing body that sets policy and gives guidance to both the CIO and the CEO, both are very incredibly important, because yes, we can make all the money in the world, but if our participants in the pension plan are not getting the communications, are not being treated well by staff, or there is a disconnect between the plan and its participants, that could certainly be trouble waiting in the wings.
So Hank, one last technical question I'm going to ask you, and then we'll talk a little bit about investments. There's a range right now. There always is a range, but tell us what the range is on assumed rates of return within your membership. Kind of what's the low, what's the high, and what's the median? And what are the implications of that number moving around, and how's it determined? So talk to us first about what the range is, and then secondly, what the implications of that range are.
Yeah, so I would say the median investment return assumption is around 7% at this point. Oh, actually, I'm sorry, excuse me. I think it's at just under 7.5%. And the range is probably under 7 to just north of 7.5.
Okay.
Over the last 12 years, so since the great financial crisis, the investment return assumption has steadily been ticking down. So I remember when I first came to NCPERS, the general, sort of understood return assumption was around between 8 and 8.5%. And over the last dozen years, it's dropped by a full, 100 basis points. I think that's being very responsible. I think, folks who are fiduciaries to pension plans take their fiduciary responsibilities very seriously and look to see, what the medium to long-term economic outlook looks like, and accordingly makes those assumptions relative to investment returns. And again, I can't stress enough, for pension plans that are as large as 400 billion, or even small plans that are several couple $billion dollars. These are big assets, big entities, and we cannot turn on a dime. And so unfortunately, we've been criticized for taking sort of this disciplined, steady ratcheting down of investment returns, whereas some would like for us to drop from 8.5 all the way down to 3.5 in one fiscal year. And what that would do, making such a dramatic drop is then all the other assumptions based on return assumptions get impacted. So just by changing the return assumptions, our funded status goes from what is universally accepted as healthy and sustainable to looking as if it's the plan's going to be insolvent in matter of years. Contribution rates that are, say, on average about I think it's about 6 to 7% of salary for employees, and about 20 to 22% for employers would jump up dramatically. And so we as trustees, as plan administrators, we need to be cognizant of yes, recognizing what's going on with the economy, but making gradual changes versus trying to change on a dime.
Good. So Hank, let's pretend that we're CIOs now. We'll put our CIO hat on. History of investing for pension plans. At one point there was one asset class, T-bills, and then for a long time there were two asset classes, right? Long only, public equity, and fixed income. And that was the way the world worked for a long time. Today, most mature plans have 5 to 7 asset classes, and any number of asset mix from an allocation standpoint. NAIC members are particularly concerned with the alternative asset bucket, so the private equity and hedge fund space. Talk to us a little bit topically about what's going on in that world, what you're hearing, what you're seeing, where the concerns are as it relates to asset allocation, particularly going towards private equity and alternatives.
Yeah, so Bob, as you know, and as I think your audience members probably guessed from the first 30 minutes or so, I am more comfortable in the administration and policy aspect. But fortunately for you and for them, I did sleep at a Holiday Inn Select last night, so I think I feel comfortable talking about CIOs. But no, and to be more serious, one of the things we did right after everything got shut down is I mentioned that we wanted to provide value to our plans. So soon thereafter, we organized a monthly virtual roundtable of plan CIOs. And we have about, at this point, just under 30 plan CIOs who meet on a monthly basis to talk about issues that they're concerned about. So we have plans that are statewide plans to city plans to county plans. So I think we have a very good cross section of what I would term sort of mid-market state and local pension plans. So plans with AUM north of $2 billion and under about $60 billion. And I think the things that I've learned from these conversations are that right after the COVID crash, there was concern about liquidity. But I think largely that's dissipated. I think most plans took a pretty defensive position heading into 2020. I think most felt that the economic expansion was pretty long in the tooth. I don't think anyone really predicted a COVID crisis, but they recognized the other shoe was going to be dropping sometime, and they were more inclined to take defensive positions, which I think worked out well for many plans. And I think the sort of the third theme is alternative is still a very important aspect for plans. I think your members recognize public sector pension plans. We are certainly not the first adopters, and trying to get a public plan as a client may be very frustrating because it takes a long time. But once we, enter a space, we largely tend to stay in that space. And so there was no concern, or there was no conversations that I heard where they felt that the private contract space was something to abandon in the near or medium term.
Very good. That's good to hear. So I think we can take from your remarks that as the stock market generally has recovered, public pension plans have rebounded. Public pension plans are close to being as healthy as they were coming into the pandemic. And it remains to be seen what direction the economy goes as to how they'll fare as this all plays out. But for now, we're down, but we're not down as severely as we either thought we could have been or we were at the start of the market decline. Is that fair?
That is absolutely fair. And in fact, I would even say when most plans, or many plans, ended their fiscal year June 30th, and I think we're starting to see a number of reports coming out on fiscal year 2020, that plans actually ended in the positive at the end of June 30th. So I think there were a number of plans that reported 4% gain, or maybe a little more than 4% gain at the end of June. So from where we were at where the bottom of the initial COVID crash was to where we ended up at the end of June, world of difference. Having said that, still, the fundamentals of the economy still aren't there. And I think we're certainly pleased with where we are, but by no means do we think we're out of the woods yet.
Good. So Hank, let's now turn in our final segment and talk a little bit about diversity. It comes in many forms. There's employment diversity. In some places, there's supplier diversity. And then as an extension of supplier diversity, there's investment manager diversity. What do you observe the role of diversity to be in the public pension plan space? And how do you think we're doing?
So I think from state and local pension plans, I can certainly tell you that diversity and to a large degree, ESG more broadly has been a topic of conversation for at least a decade. Mm-hmm. Are we where we would like to be relative to diversity of asset managers, even internally? Probably not, but I think the conversations are still going. I think that from trust, speaking in broad strokes, I think, for the first set of years, diversity and inclusion were largely driven by trustees. I think there is more of an acceptance of the value of diversity and inclusion on the investment staff over the last handful of years. So I think that's encouraging. But I think we still have a long way to go, and I would like for us, NCPERS, NAIC, and others to help public plans get there quicker and more broadly.
So Hank, we're friends, and you're doing me a favor by doing this show. I'm going to put you on the spot. You said that you'd like to see NCPERS and NAIC and other groups do more. What are you, as the executive director, prepared to do about that, and what's on the horizon in terms of you doing more?
So let me speak about NCPERS as an organization. I think staff-wise, I think our staff is incredibly diverse, and I'm very happy with that. And honestly, I can say that it wasn't any sort of social engineering. It was just something that happened within NCPERS because the folks who occupied their current positions were the best candidates. And so we're very pleased with that. But we do recognize that our board needs to be a little bit more diverse, and that our speakers at our conferences and the membership on the corporate side need to be more diverse. And honestly, we need to do better at that, and we're working on making that happen. And one of the ways I think we would love to, get more inclusion and diversity of speakers, of viewpoints, and of managers is being more, closely affiliated with your group and others, so that our members, the trustees, staff, and investment staff, are exposed to different people and folks that may not be normally coming into the investment office on a regular basis.
So Hank, Washington is a town like New York of 24-hour news cycles and, in programming around TV, but everybody likes breaking news. Am I lucky enough to get any breaking news out of you today?
Oh, well, thank you for serving that up on such a nice silver platter, Bob. Yes, so I am very pleased to announce that NAIC and NCPERS have entered into a strategic relationship. We executed a memorandum of understanding to further just the goals that we just talked about. And I can't wait to really start flexing the four corners of our agreement and bringing NAIC members more in contact with NCPERS members.
Hank, I want to thank you for the job that you did in helping us work through that. The work that we're going to do with NCPERS is probably top priority for us. But you guys have you have a broader mandate and lots of things to focus on. So I appreciate you prioritizing working with NAIC, working with our members, and most importantly, ensuring broader diversity in the public employee pension plan space. So from me to you, friend to friend, thank you so much for doing that.
Oh, you're welcome. And honestly, Bob, this is not any sort of favor. This is something that we need to do. I think given sort of where the country is currently and, recognizing, the systemic, injustices and all the things that we're currently seeing. Even beyond that, we've been talking about this for, Bob, as long as you and I have known each other, and I'm just very happy that we've been able to execute it. And as I started off in my speech earlier, public plans, we are not the fastest adopters, but once we do enter space, we enter it, full bore, and we are fully committed to making inclusion and diversity a major platform for NCPERS. And again, getting the cross-pollination between your members and my members.
Well, Hank, on behalf of our members, the African American community, the Latinx community, the Asian American community, and the Native American community and women within the financial services space, we thank you. We look forward to working with you, and we look forward to demonstrating the outstanding performance that has been the hallmark of our existence in this space. Thank you. With that, Hank, I want to ask you one last question as we wrap up. And that is looking out, and you choose the time frame, 5 years or 10 years. What does the public pension plan industry look like 5 years or 10 years from now? From a, what's important, what's challenging, what's scary, and what's going well?
Yeah, so I think in terms of challenges, I think 5 years from now, I think we will still have sort of the same challenges on the investment side, making sure that there are enough, investments both in the public as well as private markets to meet our, rate of return that we've set for our plans. From policy standpoint, still continually fighting the fight in state legislatures and federal government and with the media about the value and the efficiency of state and local pension plans, where just because of all the benefits that are baked into a defined benefit plan, meaning that essentially pension plans are evergreen, so we do not need to change our investment tactic based on the age of an individual, because we are professionally managed, and because we get economies of scale because of the size. Our plans are essentially 50% more efficient than an individual account. So it's this type of message that we need to get to taxpayers and policymakers, that state and local pension plans, they are not dinosaurs. They are incredibly efficient. And beyond the efficiency, as a taxpayer, you want every agency in government to be efficient. And there is no, in my mind, there is no greater efficient agency than state and local government pensions.
That's awesome. Go ahead.
Yeah. No. And then just talk about saying that beyond that, like our plans contribute to the tax revenue of each state, where basically plans are revenue positive for states. So about 40 plans, or in 40 states, states make less contribution into a pension plan as a plan sponsor contribution, then they derive tax revenue from the investments and expenditures by the retirees. In 40 states, pension plans are revenue positive for states. So I think we have an incredible story to tell, and I look forward to telling more of that with the general public, and soon more so with your members.
Well, Hank, I want to thank you for joining us today. You've been an outstanding guest. You brought news, humor, information, insight, and education. And I really appreciate you. And we appreciate the members of NCPERS for working with us and joining us in this alliance so that we can dramatically expand the things that we do together and the overall benefit that inures to pensioners around the country. Thank you, Hank.
You're welcome, Bob, and thank you. Looking forward to that collaboration.
Outstanding. Well, folks, that wraps another issue of NAIC Insight Series. We will have a couple more coming at you very shortly. I think one has been booked with Michael Miller of Colonial Consulting. And very soon we'll be out with a broader schedule and more folks that join me in sitting where Hank is to talk about what's going on in the marketplace. That's all for today. Continue to be safe. Thank you so much. Take care.
Bye-bye.